Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. Anda bersama saya Nina Rozman dan ini Niaga Awani. Dalam jam ini kami akan bawakan pelbagai perkembangan terkini niaga, ekonomi pasaran dan juga perdagangan dari tempatan hinggalah ke antarabangsa. Dan kita akan mulakan dengan perkembangan pertama di mana Persekutuan Pengilang Malaysia FMM kecewa dengan kenaikan kadar dan kekerapan keperluan pemeriksaan perubatan pekerja asing yang dibuat tanpa berunding dengan pihak berkepentingan terlebih dahulu. Presidennya Tan Sri Soh Tian Lai berkata, FOMEMA Sedang Berhad telah mengabaikan keperluan asas untuk berunding dengan pihak berkepentingan sebelum melaksanakan perubahan dasar yang juga adalah elemen kritikal dasar negara bagi amalan baik peraturan NPGRP.
Dalam satu kenyataan, beliau berkata walaupun NPGRP mungkin tidak terpakai secara langsung kepada FOMEMA, tetapi sebagai syarikat yang mengendalikan sistem pemeriksaan kesihatan pekerja asing bagi pihak Kementerian Kesihatan, elemen asas dasar itu sepatutnya dipatuhi. Ia khususnya keperluan untuk analisis impak peraturan RIA yang akan dijalankan sebelum kenaikan kadar dan kekerapan yang akan mengakibatkan beban kawal selia lebih tinggi dan kos kepada perniagaan. Ujarnya, pelan komunikasi yang betul kepada pihak berkepentingan telah diabaikan kerana pengumuman mengenai perubahan itu hanya dibuat sehari sebelum berkuat kuasanya caj yang lebih tinggi dan kekerapan pemeriksaan perubatan dan hanya diterbitkan di laman web FOMEMA dan akaun media sosial tanpa sebarang rundingan awam atau komunikasi terlebih dulu dengan pihak berkepentingan yang berkaitan. Ini, kata beliau, telah menambahkan lagi kekecewaan komuniti perniagaan yang tidak menyedari perubahan itu. Pengilang secara keseluruhan kini akan menanggung kira-kira RM124.2 juta setiap tahun dalam kos pemeriksaan perubatan pekerja asing untuk kira-kira 600,000 pekerja asing dalam sektor itu susulan kenaikan serta-merta yuran 14% hingga 15%. Keperluan tahunan itu kini akan meningkatkan pemeriksaan perubatan sebanyak 4 kali lagi untuk seorang pekerja yang berada di Malaysia selama 10 tahun yang akan menambah kos tambahan kira-kira RM500 juta untuk sektor itu berdasarkan 600,000 pekerja asing dalam sektor itu. Tian Lai berkata, kekerapan sebelum ini adalah mencukupi untuk memantau keadaan kesihatan pekerja dengan keperluan mandatori untuk 3 tahun pertama dan pemeriksaan berikutnya dilakukan pada tahun bergantian selepas itu. Beliau berkata peningkatan berterusan dalam beban kos kawal selia ke atas industri hanya akan menjejaskan lagi operasi perniagaan yang telah pun menghadapi masa mencabar dengan ketidaktentuan luaran yang semakin mendalam akibat gangguan geopolitik baharu dan peralihan berterusan dalam tatanan ekonomi global. FMM juga menggesa kerajaan supaya melaksanakan satu sistem dalam talian hujung ke hujung tunggal yang akan menangani kecekapan dan kelemahan dalam sistem pengurusan pekerja asing termasuk menghapuskan penyedia perkhidmatan pihak ketiga yang tidak diperlukan sepanjang proses itu.
Dan untuk melihat dari perspektif industri berkenaan isu tersebut, kita bersama dengan tetamu kita Nitesh Malani merupakan pengerusi Yayasan Usahawan Malaysia. Saya nak ucapkan terima kasih Nitesh kerana sudi meluangkan masa bersama kami daripada isu ataupun laporan sebentar tadi. Apakah pandangan Nitesh berkenaan kenaikan kos pemeriksaan kesihatan pekerja asing ini? Mungkin ada pro dan cons ya terhadap kenaikan tersebut.
Terima kasih Nina, selamat pagi. Memang analisis yang kita mendapati daripada syarikat-syarikat terutamanya syarikat mikro SME dan SME yang mempunyai pekerja asing yang tinggi, ini akan memberi impak yang besar pada pandangan saya. Akan tetapi tidak ada rundingan dengan industri players atau announcement secara yang dibuat sehari sebelum inisiatif ni dilangsungkan. So pada pendapat saya, I think government serta agensi-agensi perlulah berunding dengan mendalam untuk mendapatkan apakah tindakan atau impak yang akan berlaku atas proses-proses sebegini. Seperti yang dinyatakan oleh FMM, impak secara keseluruhannya akan berlangsung secara beratus juta. Dan kenapa syarikat swasta yang diberi mandat untuk membuat testing ini memperoleh peruntungan yang agak besar. So yang merumitkan saya adalah announcement yang telah dibuat tanpa ada rundingan dengan industry players, dengan association, trade partners. Baru-baru ni Presma, association kedai-kedai mamak yang ada di Malaysia telah mengeluarkan satu kenyataan yang act sebegini tidak perlulah dijalankan secara mendadak, all of a sudden, ya. So pandangan saya adalah memang impak dia akan menjadi besar kepada pengguna atau rakyat di bawah.
Tentu kita nak lihat impak seperti yang dikongsikan, impak besar kepada industri dan juga pengguna dengan iaitu keputusan ini yang akan menyebabkan kenaikan kos operasi kepada peniaga yang menggajikan pekerja asing ini. Sudah tentu nilai dia, adakah produk dan perkhidmatan akan mengalami kenaikan ketara selepas ini? Bagaimana Nitash?
Dari segi cost impact atau produk-produk, pada pendapat saya tidaklah dia secara mendadak, akan tetapi saya ingin memperbahaskan satu kenyataan untuk isu ini. Adakah inisiatif ni atau cost increase atau more frequent check-up ini dilakukan atas masalah kesihatan yang dialami oleh pekerja asing di Malaysia? Ini adalah satu soalan besar. Adakah ini keperluan dari Kementerian Kesihatan atau dia adalah isu komersial untuk memperoleh keuntungan yang lebih besar untuk syarikat swasta yang telah dilantik oleh kerajaan? So ini adalah satu question yang saya ingin terujuk kepada Menteri Sumber Manusia atau Menteri Dalam Negeri. Bagaimanakah proses atau decision sebegini dijalankan? Ini akan membawa impak yang memang besar kepada pekerja-pekerja. Statistik yang kita perolehi, kita mendapati lebih daripada 2.5 million foreign workers yang ada di Malaysia. So memang impak ni memang terlalu besar yang kita akan jalani. Lagi-lagi isu-isu global yang ada pada masa ini. Kita mendapati pelbagai pengimport tidak dapat produk-produk beliau kerana isu yang ada di Red Sea, isu yang ada di regional issues yang kita ada, issues yang ada di Palestin dengan Israel. So dengan kos yang telah meningkat dalam masa 3 bulan yang lalu dengan apa yang dijalankan di dalam negara, pada pendapat saya ini adalah satu kerajaan patutlah mengkaji semula isu ini.
Ini nampaknya Nitash, kalau kita lihat kos medical check-up meningkat, frekuensi untuk pergi check-up tu iaitu dinaikkan kepada setiap tahun daripada 3 tahun ke 2 tahun, sekarang every year. Adakah ini dilihat akan menggalakkan pengambilan pekerja tempatan? Adakah lebih murah ambil pekerja tempatan susulan daripada kenaikan kos ini?
Saya rasa untuk kenaikan kos ini memang dari segi sudut pengambilan pekerja tempatan adalah satu, if you look at it on that spectrum, memanglah pekerja tempatan. Tetapi pekerjaan yang dijalankan oleh pekerja asing, pekerja tempatan tidak mahu membuatnya. Service sector, plantation, construction, adalah pelbagai sektor yang pekerja tempatan tidak patut untuk apa kata, fulfill some of this requirement. Itulah kenapa ramai pengusaha atau sektor SME rely on foreign worker. Akan tetapi isu untuk medical check-up ni yang telah dilakukan, there's two ways to look at it, Nina. Firstly, memang dari segi kesihatan, jikalau ada keperluan, pada pendapat saya inilah it's a very good initiative. Akan tetapi the point that made by FMM and dengan industri partners yang lain, inisiatif ni perlulah dikaji secara mendalam sebelum dia diimplementasikan. So pada pendapat saya, depends how you look at it. Bukan kata pekerja tempatan tidak mendapat opportunities. Opportunities ni memang ada. Akan tetapi vacancy yang sebegini tidak dipenuhi oleh Malaysians. So tidak ada cara yang lain untuk fill these vacancies with pekerja-pekerja dari negara asing.
Dan kita lihat iaitu secara keseluruhan pengilang yang menanggung kira-kira 124.2 juta ringgit setiap tahun dalam kos pemeriksaan perubatan pekerja asing untuk kira-kira 600,000 pekerja asing dalam sektor tersebut, susulan daripada kenaikan dikatakan serta-merta yuran 14 hinggalah 15% ini. Dan kita nak lihat iaitu bergerak ke hadapan, adakah kita perlu lihat daripada segi dasar atau polisi untuk kita cushionkan the impact terutama kepada ataupun terhadap industri ini?
I think figures yang Nina mention tadi adalah untuk sektor penghilangan saja. Apakah impact kepada sektor-sektor yang lain? Kita ada service sector. So yang tadi sebagai mana yang saya katakan tadi, kita tiada official data, tetapi yang kita tahu the figure is more than 2 million. So jikalau 2 million foreign workers has to go through yearly medical check-up, apakah impact dia? Nombor dua, impact dia bukan 14 atau 15%. Kita ada logistik cost untuk membawa pekerja-pekerja ini kepada pusat-pusat FOMEMA atau klinik-klinik untuk menjalankan check-up secara annual. So ini akan menjadi impact yang besar kepada business owners, and secara keseluruhannya kos ni akan disampaikan kepada pengguna di bawah. So kita perlulah mengkaji formula-formula yang mendapat, because pengilang atau pengusaha-pengusaha telah membayar levy yang tinggi. Lepas tu membawa pekerja ni menyediakan penginapan yang baru-baru ni memang ada, which is a very good initiative, proper staying facilities untuk pekerja ni. So untuk medical check-up, jikalau seperti yang saya katakan tadi, ada keperluan on a medical standpoint, kita mendapati pekerja yang masuk ni ada banyak isu-isu kesihatan. So perlulah kita membuat annual check-up rather than every 2 or 3 years. Saya rasa pengusaha akan faham. Akan tetapi isu ini telah tidak dibincangkan dengan industry players. So inilah satu masalah yang agak besar. Saya ingin membangkit kepada pihak kerajaan.
Baik, itu adalah antara iaitu isu-isu ataupun cabaran-cabaran yang perlu kita atasi dengan segera dan berkesan sekali. Saya nak ucapkan terima kasih kepada tetamu kita, Nita Malani, merupakan pengerusi Yayasan Usahawan Malaysia, kerana berkongsi antara daripada perspektif industri daripada susulan kenaikan kos FOMEMA yang telah meningkat ini. Dan kita akan sambung lagi topik kenaikan kos FOMEMA, apakah kata majikan selepas ini. Northport Malaysia berhad bekerjasama dengan Calories bagi melaksanakan sistem operasi terminal Nevis N4 bermula Januari 2024 bagi meningkatkan produktiviti, kecekapan dan inisiatif operasi hijau di pelabuhannya. Ketua Pegawai Eksekutif Northport, Datuk Azman Shah Muhammad Yusof berkata, kerjasama strategik antara Northport dan Calories adalah penting dalam penambahbaikan sistem operasi terminal. Bina Darul Aman Berhad BDB menjalin kerjasama dengan Shanghai Youzhou Industri Co Limited bagi melaksanakan projek pengurusan sisa industri secara inovatif. Shanghai Youzhou merupakan syarikat berpangkalan di China yang pakar dalam pengurusan proses komprehensif untuk rantaian bekalan kimia dan pengurusan pemulihan sisa pepejal, merangkumi sisa am dan sisa berjadual. CIMB Bank Berhad dalam perancangan meningkatkan jumlah dana pinjamannya untuk rakyat Sarawak dan syarikat-syarikat di Sarawak berikutan permintaan yang tinggi. Perkara itu dimaklumkan Ketua Pegawai Eksekutifnya, Datuk Abdul Rahman Ahmad, kepada Premier Sarawak Tan Sri Abang Johari Tun Openg bagi mendukung aspirasi Kerajaan Sarawak dalam menjadikan negeri itu berpendapatan tinggi menjelang 2030. Laporan penuh di saluran 501 dan astroawani.com serta dagangnews.com.
Dapatkan saluran yang hebat pada harga terbaik dengan pack entertainment kami.
Performance ni adalah yang terbaik.
Di sebalik topeng ini
Adalah siapa?
buka.
Stream drama bila-bila masa. Pengalaman kulinari untuk seisi keluarga.
Incredible.
Pengembaraan yang pasti mengujakan anak-anak.
Well, we have been treated to a masterclass, really.
Dan sukan yang membuatkan anda bersorak semahungnya.
Ini yang kita mahukan.
Segala hiburan untuk seisi keluarga ada di sini. WhatsApp Switch hari ini.
Dua beradik bawah umur dipercayai dieksploitasi ibu mereka telah pun diselamatkan oleh pihak JKM iaitu Jabatan Kebajikan Masyarakat.
Yang di-Pertuan Agong bertitah bahawa Istana Negara tidak akan terlibat dalam sembarang percaturan politik.
KPM belum putuskan bila pelajar perlu pakai semula seragam sekolah. Pemakaian sedia ada diteruskan sehingga ia diputuskan kelak.
Dua anggota polis ditahan kerja sehinggalah siasatan kes samun dan rogol.
Tekanan boleh mematahkan anda, tetapi ia juga memberi semangat dan mengangkat impian kita.
Malaysia ke Piala Asia.
Keberanian adalah anugerah dalam menghadapi tekanan dan kita akan buktikannya. Piala Asia Qatar 2023 ke semua 51 perlawanan secara langsung di Astro.
Baik, kita akan teruskan dengan perbincangan kita mengenai kadar yuran yang dinaikkan dan kekerapan pemeriksaan perubatan pekerja asing dan bagaimana perubahan ini akan beri impak ekonomi ke atas perniagaan termasuk peningkatan kos operasi dan apa impaknya dalam mengambil pekerja asing bergerak ke hadapan. Kita mempersilakan tetamu kita iaitu Datuk Syamsuddin Bardan merupakan pengarah eksekutif Persekutuan Majikan-Majikan Malaysia MEF. Saya nak ucapkan terima kasih Datuk kerana sudi meluangkan masa bersama kami pada jam ini. Datuk, sudah tentu ini adalah antara isu yang hangat kalau kita telitikan ketika ini. Adakah pihak FOMEMA mengadakan sebarang libat urus bersama pihak berkepentingan terutama majikan sebelum membuat keputusan ini?
Ini adalah satu perkara yang amat-amat dikesali kerana FOMEMA tidak ada mengambil langkah untuk berbincang dengan stakeholders. Ya. Kami sebagai stakeholder hanya tahu tentang perubahan mengenai kadar dan juga kekerapan itu melalui web page FOMEMA dan juga laporan pada social media FOMEMA. Dan ini amat-amat tidak menyenangkan pihak majikan kerana ia melibatkan kos yang tinggi dan juga ini berlaku dalam keadaan di mana ekonomi kita agak terjejas dan juga ekspor kita juga agak terjejas kerana apa yang berlaku di pasaran antarabangsa.
Jadi Datuk, adakah majikan akan tawar lebih banyak pekerjaan kepada pekerja tempatan atau masih ada industri yang masih gagal menarik minat rakyat tempatan untuk kerja dalam sektor tersebut seperti peladangan, sawit, pembuatan berat, pembinaan dan sebagainya?
Ya, sebenarnya kita memberikan keutamaan kepada pekerja tempatan dalam mengambil pekerja untuk keperluan majikan-majikan, tetapi kita tahu bahawa setengah kerja itu tidak menarik minat pekerja tempatan untuk memasuki bidang berkenaan. Ya, kita MEF bersetuju agar pada jangka panjangnya kita mengurangkan kebergantungan kepada pekerja asing, tetapi ini hendaklah dilakukan secara peringkat demi peringkat dan tidak melibatkan peningkatan kos sebagaimana yang dilakukan oleh FOMEMA mengenai pemeriksaan perubatan pekerja asing berkenaan.
Adakah permintaan MEF kepada kerajaan, adakah perlu masuk campur tangguh dahulu kenaikan dan kekerapan periksaan kesihatan ini? Bagaimana pandangan Datuk?
Sebenarnya MEF memohon kepada pihak kerajaan supaya campur tangan dan tidak melaksanakan apa yang dinyatakan oleh FOMEMA untuk sementara waktu semasa kita berbincang, dan kita harus mendapat satu kata putus mengenai industri, pihak majikan dan juga pihak FOMEMA itself supaya kita dapat mengimbangi kepentingan negara dalam perkara ini. Ya.
Yuran dinaikkan antara 10 hingga 14% dengan anggaran 2 juta pekerja asing di negara ini. Majikan perlu menanggung kira-kira 414 juta ringgit setahun untuk peperiksaan perubatan pekerja asing. Jadi, apakah yang akan dilakukan perniagaan dengan tanggungan tambahan ini? Adakah mereka akan lihat balik status ataupun financial iaitu dokumen ataupun file-file mereka, detail file financial mereka untuk membuat keputusan selepas ini?
Ini adalah sesuatu yang amat membimbangkan kerana kita tahu bahawa kalau ada peningkatan kos adalah kemungkinan besar majikan-majikan tidak akan menanggung kos berkenaan, sebaliknya ia akan pass on the cost kepada para pengguna, dan ini akan melibatkan lagi peningkatan kos. Ini hendaklah dielakkan pada masa ini supaya kita dapat sebenarnya menyetabilkan harga-harga di pasaran tempatan sebenarnya.
Jadi apakah langkah yang boleh diambil untuk kita pastikan kenaikan yuran ini tidak memberikan tekanan kewangan yang tidak wajar kepada majikan, terutamanya daripada sektor PKS ini, Datuk?
Ya, sebenarnya di PMKS di Malaysia, mereka mewakili satu jumlah besar sebenarnya. Kalau kita katakan tentang majikan yang mempunyai kurang dari 5 pekerja, jumlahnya adalah 690,000 majikan, dan kebanyakan mereka ini menggunakan pekerja asing kerana jenis kerja itu memang tidak menarik kepada pekerja tempatan, dan ini adalah sesuatu yang memang kita harapkan agar pihak kerajaan sebenarnya campur tangan dan menangguhkan sebarang keputusan yang telah dibuat oleh FOMEMA itu secara sebelah pihak saja. Unilateral decision yang tidak dibincangkan. Saya tak tahu sama ada mereka mendapat kelulusan daripada Kementerian Kesihatan atau tidak, ataupun daripada kerajaan itself. Tetapi ini adalah sesuatu yang tidak seharusnya berlaku. Ya.
Jadi adakah kita perlu perpatah balik kepada dasar? Adakah dasar perlu diselaraskan untuk seimbangkan, kita boleh cakap bukan saja majikan tetapi pekerja, pihak berkuasa, kawasa daripada kenaikan ini?
Ya, sebenarnya begitulah harapan kita supaya sebarang kenaikan itu hendaklah dibincangkan terlebih dahulu kerana ia melibatkan kos yang tinggi dan juga akan melibatkan kos sara hidup yang lebih tinggi kepada keseluruhan rakyat sebenarnya.
Keputusan sudah pun dibuat iaitu boleh dikatakan medical check-up every year, cost fee dia pun meningkat setiap tahun. Jadi apakah boleh cakap langkah-langkah persediaan oleh industri-industri ini dalam menghadapi kenaikan kos bergerak ke hadapan, Datuk?
Sebenarnya jika ini dilaksanakan juga, kemungkinan besar kemahuan majikan untuk mengambil pekerja asing itu akan terjejas, ya. Tetapi untuk majikan move forward, mereka harus mengambil langkah untuk memodernkan operasi mereka, dan ini memakan belanja yang lebih tinggi. Ya. Dan saya berharap jika benar-benar ini berlaku, kerajaan haruslah membantu PMKS ini untuk memodernkan operasi mereka dan juga meningkatkan produktiviti mereka supaya mereka mengurangkan kebergantungan kepada sumber manusia untuk melakukan operasi mereka, ya. Dan ini mungkin pada akhirnya nanti kita akan sebenarnya mengurangkan pekerja asing dan juga mengurangkan penggunaan pekerja-pekerja, dan pekerja sedia ada boleh dilatih semula dan diminta untuk melakukan kerja-kerja yang mungkin lebih produktif, ya.
Bagaimana untuk kita memahami ataupun ekosistem keseluruhan industri ataupun pasaran buruh selepas ini, mengambil kira kenaikan kos iaitu perubatan kesihatan ini, termasuk juga dengan iaitu sistem gaji progresif yang dirancang untuk melaksanakan tahun ini, di samping itu mengekalkan iaitu gaji minimum. Bagaimana Datuk melihat iaitu bergerak ke hadapan iaitu dinamika pasaran buruh kita selepas ini?
Ya, sebenarnya waktu sehat, waktu singkat ini, memang kita masih memerlukan pekerja asing. Tetapi moving on daripada peringkat yang lebih jauh lagi untuk jangka panjangnya, memang kita melihat bahawa kita perlu mengurangkan kebergantungan kepada pekerja asing, dan ini memerlukan sebenarnya latihan semula, dan ini akan dibuat melalui model gaji progresif, ya, dan kita harapkan agar nanti pihak kerajaan akan dapat membantu majikan-majikan dan juga pekerja untuk meningkatkan pendapatan mereka, terutamanya pekerja tempatan, supaya mereka akan mahu mencuburi bidang-bidang yang sebelum ini mereka tak mahu mencuburi, dan ini juga mungkin akan melibatkan penjenamaan semula sesetengah kerja itu supaya ia lebih menarik kepada pekerja tempatan. Jadi saya melihat bahawa pada jangka panjangnya pasaran buruh kita akan lebih dinamik, lebih inovatif, dan pekerja-pekerja akan lebih mahir, dan saya sendiri berharap agar peratusan pekerja mahir di Malaysia itu akan dapat ditingkatkan kepada lebih daripada 45%, supaya nanti pekerja-pekerja kita akan lebih produktif, dan majikan juga menggunakan teknologi-teknologi baru dan digabungkan dengan kemahiran pekerja yang lebih tinggi. Jadi kita boleh meningkatkan produktiviti kita dan juga memastikan bahawa Malaysia lebih berdaya saing, dan sebagaimana yang dinyatakan dalam plan model ekonomi itu, madani ekonomi, kita akan dapat meningkatkan daya saing Malaysia kepada peringkat at least 12 teratas di dunia. Dan ini amat penting kerana jika kita produktif dan jika kita kompetitif, sebarang peningkatan kos itu akan dapat diimbangi dengan peningkatan produktiviti dan juga daya saing.
Baik, sudah tentu kita berharap dengan kenaikan ataupun perubahan ini sejajar dengan matlamat, terutamanya daripada segi kesihatan dan juga keselamatan awam, atau kita perlu lagi mencari cara ataupun strategi penambahbaikan agar kita dapat menghala ke arah pendekatan alternatif yang boleh mencapai objektif yang sama dan lebih berkesan bergerak ke hadapan. Sekali lagi saya nak ucapkan terima kasih kepada tetamu kita, Datuk Syamsuddin Bardan, merupakan pengarah eksekutif Persekutuan Majikan-Majikan Malaysia MEF, dan semua perkongsian yang akan kami rangkumkan dalam astroawani.com dan semua platform digital Astro Awani. Semaiden Group Berhad dianugerahkan kontrak bernilai 100 juta ringgit oleh NUR Renewable Sudian Berhad untuk membangunkan loji tenaga solar di Taman Teknologi Tinggi Kulim KHTP Kedah. NUR pakar dalam penjanaan, penghantaran, pengedaran dan peruncutan elektrik di Malaysia diletakkan secara unik sebagai satu-satunya utiliti kuasa bebas dengan hak eksklusif dalam KHTP. Malaysia Airlines mengumumkan platform keupayaan pengedaran baharu NDC MH Plus akan tersedia di 6 negara termasuk Malaysia, Indonesia, India, Australia, Singapura dan United Kingdom bermula hari ini. NDC merupakan program industri pelancongan yang disokong oleh Persatuan Pengangkutan Udara Antarabangsa yang membolehkan syarikat penerbangan memodernkan cara produk dijual kepada ejen pelancongan dengan perkhidmatan terpilih selain penawaran produk yang lebih baik serta meningkatkan pengalaman pelanggan secara keseluruhan. Jentayu Sustainables Berhad jamin prestasi syarikat kekal kukuh meskipun harga sahamnya jatuh mendadak, yang ia sifatkan sebagai naik turun jangka pendek dan tidak mencerminkan prestasi yang sebenar. Pada minggu lepas, syarikat bahan pembinaan itu menyaksikan penurunan harga saham sebanyak 61.5% daripada harga pembukaan dagangan RM1.30 pada Rabu kepada harga penutup 50 sen pada Jumaat. Laporan penuh di saluran 501 dan astroawani.com serta dagangnews.com. Sudah sampai masa negara-negara di rantau Asia memberikan tumpuan kepada penubuhan dana kewangan Asia IMF. Perkara itu dinyatakan pakar ekonomi Profesor Dr. Jomo Kwame Sundaram yang melihat penubuhan dana itu akan mengurangkan pergantungan negara-negara di rantau berkenaan kepada kuasa besar dunia. Katanya cadangan penubuhan dana itu seperti dibangkitkan Perdana Menteri Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim dalam syarahannya di China akan menyediakan negara-negara di rantau ini alternatif yang lebih baik ketika berdepan krisis.
And I think that was an important idea to put forward. A lot has been invested into this, and I think we should not exaggerate what a regional monetary fund could achieve. But I think if we look at what has happened in Latin America, for example, Latin America is actually in a better situation now regionally as far as international regional monetary arrangements, because you have, unfortunately, an international monetary fund which no longer takes its own mandate very seriously, a mandate which has been betrayed since the early 1990s.
Bila berkata demikian, dalam sesi dialog ke mana arah tuju Malaysia, pendahulu ekonomi dan masa depan Malaysia dalam era ketidaktentuan global sempena wacana pemikir global di Industri Melaya UM pada Isnin. Selain Johor, dialog yang dikendalikan Profesor Ulung Dr. Rajah Rasya itu turut menampilkan Presiden Rangkaian Penyelesaian Mapan Pertubuhan Bangsa-Bangsa Bersatu PBB, Prof. Dr. Jeffrey D. Sachs dan Profesor Pelawat UM, Profesor Datuk Dr. Wu Wing Tai. Jomo yang juga penasihat kanan penyelidik Institut Penyelidikan Khazanah KRI berkata, pada masa sama, Malaysia perlu terus memastikan ASEAN sebagai zon aman, bebas dan berkecuali. Katanya, pendekatan ini sudah lebih setengah abad dibangkitkan dan semua pihak perlu mengambil serius, termasuk memastikan rantau ini kekal bebas nuklear. Baik, ini adalah perkembangan baharu yang kami terima. Satu kenyataan media daripada Datuk Seri Johari Abdul Ghani, Pengurusi Jawatan Kuasa Pemulihan Aset (1MDB). Izinkan saya bacanya dalam bahasa Inggeris. The 1MDB Asset Recovery Task Force convened a meeting on 22nd January 2024 to discuss the latest update on the asset recovery and other matters relating to the Goldman Sachs dispute. The Government of Malaysia acknowledged the complexities and confidentiality surrounding the details of the settlement. However, it still aims to provide transparency and updates on the current situation to the public. First, a settlement agreement details. The settlement agreement signed on August 2020 between the Government of Malaysia and Goldman Sachs require Goldman Sachs to pay $2.5 billion cash payment and provide the Government of Malaysia with a $1.4 billion asset recovery guarantee. Second, on the failure of negotiators and lawyers to secure a fair settlement. Currently, it has been noted that the negotiators and lawyers representing the Government of Malaysia at the material time failed to secure a fair and adequate settlement from Goldman Sachs. For the information of the public, 1MDB paid unusually high advisory fees of $606 million to Goldman Sachs for advising on the issuance of the 3 bonds totaling $6.5 billion. And Goldman Sachs' direct involvement in the 1MDB scandal has resulted in being fined by various regulators, including the Department of Justice (DOJ), for the sum of $2.9 billion. Notably, the amount paid by Goldman Sachs in fines surpassed the cash payment paid to the Government of Malaysia, which is $2.5 billion, despite Malaysia suffering the greatest repercussions from the 1MDB scandal by having to pay $6.5 billion, principal amount plus interest of approximately $3.2 billion over the span of 10 years to service including the updates. We can see that service of the 1MDB debt. And the third, dispute over asset recovery guarantee. The current dispute centers around Goldman Sachs' attempt to offset the fine imposed of M-Bank, which is 2.8 billion ringgit, and the settlement agreement with IPIC, which is $1.8 billion against a $1.4 billion asset recovery guarantee. Goldman Sachs contends that its obligations under the asset recovery guarantee have been discharged through this offset. However, the Government of Malaysia disputes this. It asserts that the fines imposed on M-Bank and the settlement with IPIC are not encompassed within the scope of the $1.4 billion asset recovery guarantee. And looking at the fiduciary duty and negligence concerns, the 1MDB task force is additionally examining whether the negotiators and lawyers representing the Government of Malaysia at the material time may have failed in their fiduciary duty or were negligent in arriving at the settlement agreement. Such lapses on the part of negotiators and lawyers in failing to negotiate a fair and clear settlement agreement have compromised the government of Malaysia's position in the ongoing dispute. And the current status, the government of Malaysia has filed its reply on the 8th November 2023 to Goldman Sachs arbitration request, and the parties are currently in the process of agreeing on the procedural timetable. Additionally, the 1MDB task force is also considering to initiate legal proceedings against a number of foreign banks that facilitated the fund transfer related to 1MDB without conducting proper Know Your Client KYC processes at that material time. And lastly, the 1MDB task force is firmly committed in addressing the 1MDB matter transparently and holding all parties accountable. The complexities of the settlement agreement require careful examinations, and the 1MDB task force is actively participating in the arbitration process to ensure a fair resolution in the best interests of the Malaysian people. Keep tuning with Niaga Awani, where we will bring more updates right after this. Keberanian seorang anak muda menceburi bidang yang jarang diteroka usahawan lain tidak sia-sia apabila mampu membuka syarikat yang menyediakan perkhidmatan memasang hiasan dinding wainscoting. Biarpun mempunyai pengalaman dalam bidang pembinaan, namun itu bukan penghalang kepada Ahmad Afzan Suhaimi, 32 tahun, untuk membuka perniagaan sendiri bersama seorang rakan kongsi pada 2017.
Walaupun hanya bermula secara kecil-kecilan di rumah, namun dia akhirnya membuka bengkel Grand Wall Pro Venture di Tasik Gelugur, Pulau Pinang selepas produk dihasilkan mendapat sambutan menggalakkan daripada pelanggan.
Permulaannya kami buat wainscoting dekat rumah. Bermula daripada kecil-kecilan, saya dengan partner kami sendiri yang buat pasang, potong, semua mengecat. Kami berpindah daripada rumah, kami ambil kedai. Dari situ kami start berkembang. Daripada macam kami buat wainscoting, sekarang kami dah ada buat sekali dengan kabinet, TV kabinet, wardrobe. And then yang terbaru kami dah buat, kami ada mesin untuk mihrab. Masa buat kat rumah, dah sambutan dia menggalakkan. Kami buat banyak guna media sosial lah.
Kesungguhan Grand Wall Pro menjalankan perniagaan berasaskan kayu menarik perhatian Lembaga Perindustrian Kayu Malaysia MTIB yang menyediakan bimbingan dan bantuan mesin bagi memajukan sektor tersebut. Ujar Ahmad Afzan, bantuan mesin daripada MTIB membolehkan pihaknya menyiapkan tempahan pelanggan dengan lebih cepat selain meluaskan skop pelanggan hingga ke kawasan utara Semenanjung.
Kami banyak pelanggan daripada kawasan utara, daripada termasuklah sampai ke Perlis dan sehingga ke selatan Perak. Dan kami juga cover zon utara ni lah. Kami juga ada cawangan dekat Kuala Lumpur. Setiap alam, alhamdulillah feedback customer semua memberangsangkan lah, sebab banyak dia bagi referral daripada satu customer ke customer yang lain. Bermula daripada media sosial, dia dapat kami contact kami, and then kami deliver projek dekat rumah. Untuk bimbingan, kami mendapat bimbingan daripada MTIB, agensi perkayuan Malaysia lah. Kami dapat training dan mesin.
Afzan mengakui bidang perkayuan termasuk hiasan dinding dan reka bentuk dalaman mempunyai potensi besar dan perlu diterokai dengan lebih mendalam. Sehubungan itu, pihaknya merancang meluaskan perniagaan termasuk kemungkinan menghasilkan perabot pasang siap atas nama Grand Wall Pro untuk dipasarkan ke seluruh Malaysia.
Menternak lembu pedaging, harga bayangan bukan sesuatu yang mudah, apatah lagi untuk mencari pasaran dan pelanggan. Seperti daging lembu, Bakal, Kobe dan Wagyu, ia dikenali sebagai daging bermutu tinggi sehingga harganya mencecah ribuan ringgit bagi setiap kilogram. Namun syarikat Kelfarm sedang berhad tampil berani dengan menghasilkan daging Wagyu dan Kobe untuk pasaran dalam negara dengan harga lebih rendah berbanding yang diimport.
Pengarah urusan Kilfarm Sdn Bhd Faizul Akmal berkata, syarikat yang ditubuhkan pada 2022 itu pada mulanya mengimport bakal lembu wagyu dari Thailand sebelum membiarkannya melalui kaedah permanian berhadas. Malah, syarikat itu turut mempunyai makmal pendidikan dan 2 kandang, masing-masing di Pantai Cahaya Bulan dan wakaf baru di Tumpuan.
Kita tengok pada potensi daging wagyu ni yang mendapat permintaan ramai daripada pengguna. Jadi benda tu semua duk viral daging wagyu. So kita bermula dengan inisiatif kita ambil bakal daripada Thailand. So kita cuba kembangkan bakal tu. So tengok pada potensi memang lembu wagyu ni memang sesuai kita ternak di Malaysia. Terutama di Kelantan kita. Jadi lembu tu boleh hidup dengan sihat, membesar dengan baguslah. Kita guna kaedah AI. AI ni dia panggil permanian berhadas.
Sementara itu, Pegawai Penternakan di Kilfarm Nur Nazifah Amirah Muhammad Suhaimi berkata, lembu bakal wagyu dan Kobe sesuai diternak dalam iklim Khatulistiwa. Jangka usia lembu antara 30 hingga 35 bulan dipilih untuk disembelih bagi menghasilkan daging berkualiti, tekstur menarik dan lembut.
Kita kat Malaysia ni kan kita dekat Khatulistiwa, suhu dan tropika. So memang boleh adapt dengan situasi dekat Malaysia ni. Sebab suhu kita tak terlalu panas dan tak terlalu sejuk. So lembu wagyu ni boleh adapt dengan persekitaran dekat sini. Jadi kalau kita tengok pun lembu pun tak stres. Jadi daging dia pun cantik. Kalau lembu stres tu kemungkinan daging yang dihasilkan tu kan tak cantik. Macam itulah. Kalau kat sini kita jaga dari segi pemakanan lah. Kita ada rumusan formulasi diet khas untuk lembu. Kita ada campuran dia dan kita tengok nutrient content dia. Contohnya protein berapa, karbohidrat berapa untuk bagi makan pada lembu lah. Dan di samping tu juga kita bagi makan macam lembu biasa, makan rumput jerami. Cuma formulasi diet khas tu tu adalah resipi rahsia daripada syarikat kami lah. Yang tu kami tak boleh kongsi. Kalau ikut macam urut tu kami tak buat sebab itu di luar daripada kami. Cuma macam kita bagi dengan muzik. Kalau macam siang hari kita bagi dengan ayat Al-Quran, muzik untuk terapi untuk dia lah. Tak nak ada bagi dia stres.
Dalam penternakan lembu bakal mahal itu, pihaknya turut menjalinkan kerjasama dengan mardi dan agensi berkaitan lain. Sementara media sosial menjadi medium penting pemasaran dan pengenalan produk kepada orang ramai.
Bermula dengan mengambil resipi ibu mentua yang mahir membuat muruku sanggul, seorang wanita akhirnya menjadi usahawan muruku dan kerepek apabila produk dihasilkan mendapat sambutan hangat. Bukan itu saja, Nur Azlina Aman, 47 tahun, mampu menyewa premis menjual muruku dan kerepek atas nama Nina Resources di Pajak Song Pelbatas Pulau Pinang selepas beberapa tahun beroperasi di rumah.
Dia mengambil keputusan membuka perniagaan sendiri pada 2014 selepas menyedari tidak ramai usahawan menghasilkan muruku sanggul.
Muruku sanggul ni sebenarnya adalah hasil usaha bapa mak mentua saya. Setelah dia membuat sendiri di rumah, lepas tu saya tengok dia berusaha mencuba menghasilkan muruku ni, nampak macam ada satu pasaran lah. Jadi saya ambil alih dan membuat sendiri muruku sanggul tu bersama suami. So permintaan makin hari makin bertambah. So saya pun buka satu bengkel sendiri dekat tepi rumah mak mentua saya. Dan sekarang ni terdapat banyak pemborong-pemborong datang ke kedai. So kita terpaksa membuka lagi satu macam sebuah kedai lah untuk mendapatkan hasil yang produk yang lebih ni, untuk dapatkan kuantiti yang lebih banyak. Saya menggunakan media sosial lah untuk pasarkan saya punya muruku sanggul ni. Alhamdulillah nampak permintaan tu makin lama makin berkembang.
Selain perisa asli, Nur Azlina turut menghasilkan muruku sanggul perisa jagung, kacang pis dan kacang merah. Permintaan bagi produk tersebut meningkat berlipat kali ganda pada musim perayaan sehingga menyebabkan kaki tangan Nina Resources terpaksa bekerja pada hari cuti. Tambahnya pada hari biasa antara 15 hingga 20 kotak besar muruku sanggul dihasilkan dan meningkat kepada 50 kotak pada musim perayaan.
Boleh mendapat pasaran kita, boleh kata dalam sehari tu dalam 15 kotak yang besar lah. 15 kotak yang besar. Tu pun kadang-kadang kita tak sempat penuhi pasaran tu sebab selalu masuk order yang begitu tinggi. Pemerintah kita banyak sebelah Kedah dan sebelah Perak. Yang kita pun memang sekarang ni cuba meningkatkan kita punya produk kita ni ke sebelah selatan lagi lah. Sebab baru-baru ni kita masuk dalam media sosial, banyak permintaan sebelah selatan, tapi kita tengah usaha untuk mendapatkan pemborong-pemborong lagi sebelah sana, untuk dapatkan ejen yang sebelah sana lah, untuk berkembangkan kita punya produk buku sanggu kita ni.
Berikutan permintaan melebihi bekalan, Nur Azlina berhasrat meluaskan perniagaannya termasuk menambah mesin semi-auto bagi meningkatkan produktiviti harian. Selain untuk pasaran sedia ada, Nina Resources turut menyediakan produk meruku sanggul sebagai cenderahati pada majlis kenduri kahwin.
Baik, kita akan teruskan dengan perkembangan ringgit di mana ia ditutup rendah semalam berbanding dolar Amerika Syarikat seiring mata wang negara pesat membangun yang lain. Berikutan pelabur memilih dolar Amerika Syarikat didorong oleh kebimbangan terhadap prospek ekonomi global dan menjelang penerbitan data AS lewat minggu ini yang mungkin mempengaruhi prospek kadar faedah di Amerika Syarikat. Dan pada 6 petang, ringgit diniagakan rendah turun kepada 4.7280 berbanding dolar Amerika Syarikat daripada paras penutup 4.7160 pada Jumaat. Dan untuk kita meneliti bagaimanakah prestasi ringgit setakat pagi ini, ia berada pada paras 4.7. Kalau kita dapat saksikan di sini 4.737 yang dapat kita saksikan setakat 23 Januari 2024, dan prestasi ataupun pergerakan nilai ringgit Malaysia dalam tempoh seminggu daripada 16 Januari sehinggalah 23 Januari. Di sini kita dapat saksikan graf menunjukkan peningkatan mengalami trend penyusutan, iaitu antara nilai yang tertinggi dalam tempoh seminggu kita dapat saksikan ia berada lebih kurang pada paras 4.6793, dan daripada 17 Januari sehinggalah hari ini ia telah mengalami penyusutan dalam nilai ringgit Malaysia sehinggalah ia mencapai paras pernah mencapai paras terendah dalam tempoh seminggu kepada 4.7437. Dan ini adalah prestasi nilai ringgit Malaysia yang dapat kita saksikan setakat pagi ini dalam tempoh seminggu. Dan Bursa Malaysia ditutup tinggi bagi hari kedua berturut-turut semalam disokong oleh aktiviti membeli saham berharga rendah dalam saham wajaran tinggi dan permodalan kecil terpilih. Pada 5 petang, produksi Bursa Malaysia KLCI naik 4.82 mata kepada 1491.19 daripada paras penutup 1486.37 pada Jumaat minggu lepas. Dan prestasi FBM KLCI untuk kita teliti setakat jam 9.34 pagi, ia berada pada paras 1495.51, dan ini adalah kadar ataupun paras waktu pembukaan Bursa Malaysia setakat pagi ini sebanyak 0.29%, peningkatan kepada 4.32. Dan prestasi FBM KLCI kita dalam tempoh 5 hari yang dapat kita saksikan daripada hari Rabu sehinggalah hari Selasa minggu ini, ia berada mengalami trend daripada Rabu, trend penurunan daripada paras lebih daripada 1490, namun ia turun sehingga hari Jumaat. Antara prestasi yang terendah dalam tempoh 5 hari ia berada pada paras 1477.95, namun daripada Jumaat minggu lepas sehinggalah hari Selasa ia telah mengalami peningkatan trend untuk FTSE Bursa Malaysia KLCI sehinggalah ia mencapai tahap terkini pada 1494.61 setakat pagi ini dan pada 23 Januari 2024. Dan teruskan bersama kami untuk dapatkan iaitu rangkuman informasi berita niaga termasuk prestasi pasaran saham Malaysia dan perdagangan semasa untuk kita memahaminya bersama ahli panel jemputan mengenai aspek ataupun lanskap ekonomi dan juga pasaran selama 1 jam 30 minit. Dan sekian sahaja Niaga Awani pada kali ini. Saya Nina Rozman. Salam hormat.
Live from Davos, join us all week for our exclusive interview. O evento terá meeting of the World Economic Forum is underway at Davos.
Path forward in today's geopolitical and economic
advances in generative AI.
One of the key topics here in Davos this year.
This time is about rebuilding trust.
Geopolitical divides are preventing us from coming together around global solutions for global challenges. People everywhere are losing faith in governments, institutions, and financial and economic systems.
We have seen a dangerous divergence, richer countries doing much better than poor countries. This divergence matters not only to the people impacted, it matters to all of us because it undermines global security.
Poverty anywhere is a threat to prosperity everywhere.
We cannot think of eradicating poverty without caring about climate, healthcare,
food insecurity, and fragility. We all need to have the ability of dealing with all of these issues at the same time because we don't have a choice.
The hottest year on record was last year. We really are turning our planet into something that's being destroyed by the minute.
Developed world must do more. They are talking a lot. They are acting less.
Los 100,000 millones de dólares de París ya no son nada. La cantidad que se necesita cada año es 30 veces superior.
There is a strong dependence to fossil base that we cannot simply ignore. Then the investments need to be for the future, for green energy.
Only 1 in 8 people actually have 1 or more green skills. We need to figure out a way to reskill millions of people.
At the speed at which things are going, everybody needs training, the frontline workers as well as the white-collar workers.
While governments hold many of the levers to deal with the great challenges of our time, business have the innovation, the technology, the talents to deliver the solutions we need.
AI has been somewhat demystified because people really use it now. And that's, I think, always the best way to pull the world forward with a new technology.
We've never had a broad general-purpose technology that diffused to all corners of the globe and created abundance equally. We have a shot at it.
It has lots of dark sides to it as well. We have over 70 major elections that are happening this year, and all of those can go the way the voters want, or AI can change that.
The power of AI must be managed. Once you build that solid foundation, you want to use it to reach for the stars.
AI could not have developed to the state that it has without collaboration.
过去几十年，经济全球化取得了巨大的进展，很大程度上还是得益于各国之间的相互信任。
We need to think of globalization differently, and we need to make sure that those who did not benefit during the first round benefit this time.
We need a new model for growth that is proactive, not reactive, that is about pre-distribution, not redistribution.
We have to rebuild trust, and most importantly, trust in each other.
It's important for us as leaders to create a culture where people feel like they belong, where they can bring their whole self.
Companies and economies are in a worse financial situation when they're not inclusive. The math has been done a million times.
Too often, young girls are withheld basic access to education and advancement that could spark a brighter future for all of us.
What are we leaving our children for the future? Are they going to inherit prosperity, or are they going to inherit conflicts?
That type of intergenerational responsibility is what has been lacking in the way that the world is being run, and we want to bring that spirit back.
The secret sauce is leadership. We're not in the audience, we're in the field. Sometimes we fail, but that's the only way we will resolve this.
Kerajaan melaksanakan audit subsidi minyak masak selepas ia dijangka meningkat 4 kali ganda menjelang hujung tahun depan.
Angkatan Pertahanan Awam Malaysia APM memilih Sabah sebagai kanvas kajian bagi meremajakan semula organisasi itu.
Sarawak telah menerima kehadiran 3.18 juta pengunjung ke negeri itu, melepasi lebih awal sasaran untuk tahun 2023.
Sabah dan Sarawak mempunyai potensi besar sebagai pelengkap pusat ekonomi di Semenanjung.
Awak tak boleh tau buat saya macam ni, Danish.
Dapatkah dia menawan balik hatinya?
I can be myself with you. You buat I happy.
Sebelum terlambat.
Hebat kan awak ni, Danish Aryan? Sekejap cakap rindu saya, lepas tu bermesra dengan Hajar.
Memang dah tiba masanya untuk kita ajar dia ni.
Take care. And saya harap saya dapat jumpa lagi. Tak oleh dah dalam.
Kau versus Aku, musim kedua, Rabu dan Kamis di Astro dan On Demand.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sadia Zahidi. I'm a managing director at the World Economic Forum. a big topic on the minds of many that are here in Davos is artificial intelligence. It's also the sustainability revolution and the green transition. And it's also what the economic picture currently looks like and how all of that then has an impact on jobs, on people's skills, which sectors are affected, which specific tasks are affected. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our Future of Jobs report, which we launched in mid-2023, looking out at the next 4 to 5 years. So most of these projections are through to 2027 from the time that we did it. Now, just a little bit about the report. We surveyed more than 800 firms, and it covers about 11 million employees, and covering 40 economies. And in total, when we then applied that data to how it was structured across the workforce using ILO data, this covers about 673 million jobs. So we're really able to say quite a lot about what is happening in the global workforce. If we could have the next slide. Thank you. At a very aggregate level, across all of that data, we find that the green transition is likely to be a positive. Yes, there will be jobs displaced, but many more will be created. So it's a net positive. When it comes to technology, the picture is a lot more mixed, and you'll hear more about that soon. Yes, a number of new roles will be created, but there will be roles displaced because what technology can do now will disrupt many tasks within roles, but in some cases, entire jobs. And then finally, the economic outlook, the uncertainty that currently exists, the lack of new investment that currently exists, that's really what's disrupting that longer term outlook, and is probably the biggest risk when it comes to creating a net negative outlook for the future of jobs. Now, as a whole, across those 673 million jobs that we looked at, there's a 23% churn. So about a quarter of all jobs will be affected. Slightly higher numbers that are declining and slightly lower numbers that are increasing. But on the whole, we're looking at a picture where, roughly speaking, there will be almost the same number of jobs that will grow as the number of jobs that will decline. But it's not a direct transfer between those jobs. So the types of jobs that will decline include, for example, people that are bank tellers or people that are administrative assistants. But the type of jobs that will increase are, for example, people who are sustainability specialists or teachers or agriculture workers. The largest absolute gain is going to come from agriculture and from education. So it's not necessarily a direct transfer between those jobs that are declining and those jobs that are growing. Now, what does that mean for people's skill sets? Even for that middle set of jobs that are not changing too much, there will still be a massive change to skills. So out of everything that you and I do every single day in our workplace, nearly half of that is going to be changing over the course of the next 4 years. So 44% of the core skills that are existing in current jobs. Now, again, this is aggregate, and it depends which specific job you look at. Now, what does that mean in terms of the types of skills that are in demand and what the biggest upskilling needs are according to the businesses that we surveyed? Number 1 and number 2 are deeply human traits. Analytical thinking, creative thinking. That is what businesses are looking for in order to upskill their employees. But following on closely from that, artificial intelligence and big data. Technology literacy, number 7. Number 8, design and user experience. So quite a lot of technology skills in there as well. There's also quite a lot about self-management. So resilience, flexibility, agility, curiosity and lifelong learning, empathy and active listening. So quite a lot in there that is also about the softer skills that we all need to develop. That's what's coming up in the aggregate across all of those jobs that we analyzed. Now, we also looked at large language models and about 11,000 tasks across 800 jobs. And we tried to understand what might happen due to large language models potentially being able to disrupt those set of tasks. And that roughly divides into 3 types of categories of tasks. There's high potential for augmentation, not surprisingly, when they're administrative or clerical activities that are repetitive, or things like designing databases, or analyzing data to improve operations. A lot of that is actually automatable now. But there's a huge scope for augmentation, evaluating personnel capabilities or performance, collecting data about customers, reading documents or materials to inform work processes, so augmenting our productivity. And then finally, there are many, many, many jobs which have very low potential for exposure to artificial intelligence, specifically large language models, and that are things that are service work. It's people who are in customer-facing roles. It includes things that require a lot of collaboration, for example, in the development of educational programs. So there is a lot that is also, for the moment, unexposed, depending on how fast the technology moves. Now, this is one way of looking at large language models and what they might do to jobs. There are others as well, and I'm going to turn it over to my fellow panelist, Erik Brynjolfsson, to tell us a lot more, the bigger picture, this research, as well as his.
Thank you, Sadia. It's such a pleasure to be here. It's been a pleasure working with you, Sadia. You know, all of us have been playing with Midjourney and ChatGPT and a lot of really cool technologies. If 2023 was the year of playing with those great technologies, I think 2024 is going to be the year of harvesting real productivity gains. In other words, it's a year that AI gets a body and starts actually being able to do things, transforming the world, transforming work, transforming productivity. And it may seem like it's an overnight success, but like most overnight successes, it's at least a decade in the making. Going back at least 12 years when Jeff Hinton and his team introduced deep learning techniques and won the ImageNet competition. And I see Andrew Eng here in the back, who was a pioneer in using these techniques as well. And they've been working on improving these techniques. And the first big set of successes was actually not in generative AI, it was in predictive AI, mapping a set of inputs X to a set of outputs Y, and if you have enough data on the inputs and the outputs, a machine can learn the relationships and how to map them together. And there have been many applications that have been quite successful. About 6 years ago, Tom Mitchell, Daniel Rock, and I tried to look at using this task-based approach that we've been talking about to understand what kinds of tasks and ultimately what kinds of occupations, what kinds of industries, what kinds of companies would be most affected, first by predictive AI and then generative AI. And here's the chart for 950 occupations. Each of these dots here is one of the occupations in the ONET taxonomy. And we found that almost all of them would be affected to some extent by predictive AI. There wasn't a single one that was unaffected. At the same time, there wasn't any that were completely transformed, that were automated entirely. Most of them had different levels of transformation. And you can see, for instance, up here, cashiers were ones that are relatively low paid. They're on the left side of the chart, have a lot of potential for transformation. There are other occupations that are relatively high paid, like over here, we've got pilots. There's a lot of potential for using predictive analytics and predictive AI there as well, even though it's relatively high paid. And I couldn't help looking at economists, and I wanted to see where we stood. I was a little surprised. I thought that a lot of the tools would transform our occupation more, but we're actually kind of on the lagging end of all of that. But the other thing is, if you look at the big picture, there's a bit of a pattern there that the lower paid jobs tended to have more tasks that were suitable for predictive analytics. Well, now we have generative AI, and what you see with the next slide is that the pattern is very different. That although again, we have the wage on this axis and the susceptibility to the tool, or the exposure to the tool here, now the curve is somewhat more upward sloping. Economists are much more affected by these new tools, as are a lot of creative professionals. So we used to think we're relatively immune, like marketing professionals, and many administrative and management jobs, many professional jobs, things that doctors and lawyers do. So we have a different set of folks being affected. but it's still that basic task-based analysis. And so if you remember that a occupation or a job is a bundle of tasks, you can break that down and see how much each occupation is going to be affected. For instance, if you look at a marketing specialist, they have to write marketing copy, they have to do market research, they have to train new employees, they have to do about 20 other tasks according to the ONET taxonomy. And my company, WorkHelix, has broken that down into like 200,000 tasks now for the whole economy, and hundreds for each occupation. And if you weight each of those by their exposure, you get a sense of what the total effect is likely to be for that particular occupation. And in turn, you can roll that up to a company and see where the exposure is for a company, or you can roll it up to an industry or to a country. And now we're beginning to be able to have a plan for harvesting that productivity that I talked about. It's not enough just to play around with the tools, but if you know what tasks are most affected, you can prioritize what parts of your company or parts of your country you want to work on first. So if we go to the next slide, what you see is that this exposure can happen in a number of ways. As Sadia was mentioning, it can happen through augmentation, and that means you don't try to replace the entire task or the entire occupation. You use the tool to augment it. And so we did this, for instance, in a call center. We studied how you could use generative AI to help the call center operators do a better job. And within 3 to 4 months, they were already, on average, about 14% more productive, more calls per hour. They also had higher customer satisfaction. They also had less employee turnover. So stockholders, customers, workers, all were better off. And interestingly, the least skilled workers actually had the biggest lift from that in that particular case. You can go through every of the tasks in your organization and get a prioritized list of what you want to do first and where you want to do that transformation. In other cases, there are opportunities to do more full automation. And in those cases, you don't need to have the human in the loop nearly as much. I actually find that most executives, most policymakers spend too much time focusing on this column and not enough on this one. And then there's another category that they mostly don't even think about at all. If we go to the next slide, we see that there are new jobs that are emerging, entirely new tasks. And by definition, it's hard for us to think of those because they don't exist yet, but they often emerge organically. And if you allow your employees to work with the tools, they end up finding new ways of using them more effectively. So ultimately, what we have now is an opportunity to take these remarkable technologies and transform work, create higher paid jobs, not just more jobs, more good jobs, have more productive companies, countries, and economies. And I believe that 2024 is going to be the year where a lot of that starts happening, and we're seeing a move towards a new trajectory for the economy. So at this point, I think we have time for questions, right? So I'm happy to take questions for I think we have about 10 or 15 minutes for any questions you may have about this. Just feel free to raise your hand. Let's go over here. Let's use the microphone here.
Thank you. In the work that you're doing around tasks,
yes.
Have you looked at how you can take parts of old jobs and then path them into new jobs, like
yes.
reskilling, upskilling?
That's a great point. So a job, an occupation is a bundle of tasks, and what you may find is that some of the tasks can now be done better by a machine, and you may want to rebundle some of the other ones in a different way. So maybe a radiologist, maybe reading x-rays is now something the machine can understand very well, but communicating that to the patient may be something you still want a human in the loop for. So maybe there's a different kind of a job there for interacting with humans. They take some of the radiologist's job and some of the nurse's job and some other doctor's job, and they bundle them. And that's really an important job, important task for entrepreneurs, for policymakers, for good managers, is to rethink work, because we're not going to have a place where everything gets automated. We're far from that kind of a world. Instead, we're seeing a world where some tasks are automated, some are augmented, and humans are still important. So there's a new set of combinations that are needed. The companies that do that effectively are going to harvest the greatest productivity gains. Other questions? Yes, right here.
Sorry, you said that humans are important.
Sorry, say again?
I said you had mentioned to the earlier question that humans are important. How do you deal with adoption of what has been stated on the board in terms of AI, because I think there's a big concern on the human part as to how adoption is receptive or unreceptive.
Right. Well, I'm very excited about the potential of AI to transform work and employment and industries. And so I encourage companies to adopt it, but there's a lot of hesitation because of some of the risks. And in particular, employees may be worried. The most common question I get is, you know, is it going to eat all the jobs? Are we going to be wiped out? And I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. And the reason is that, as I talked about, it can often be used to augment workers, but it's also the job of managers, entrepreneurs, to, when they introduce the tools, to do it in a way that they're focusing on how they can make the worker's job more productive rather than replacing them. I think ultimately that creates more value for the company, but it also helps with that organizational adoption. If you go to that radiologist earlier, as one of my colleagues did, and she was a very smart machine learning researcher at MIT, and she said, hey, we can replace radiologists with this machine. Guess what? The hospitals, the radiologists were not dying to adopt that. She realized that a better approach was what we just talked about. Hey, we can help the radiologists do their job better, spend more time communication with patients, more time on higher level abstractions. And the call center example is another one. Some companies tried to completely replace the operators. Others said, hey, we can make your job better, have the customers more happier so that your job is more pleasant. Guess what? The second company had much more adoption than the first one. So my advice is not just in terms of increasing productivity, but also in terms of speeding adoption. Think about that augmenting, how you can make it an assistant and helper rather than replacing work. Yes, over here.
Thank you. You said negotiation.
Sorry, I don't have a headset. Go ahead.
So in negotiation, you said it's low exposure to AI and language learning, but I see...
In what?
In negotiation.
Yeah.
As negotiator, but when you have a machine learning, it can calculate for you all the possibilities for a good negotiation. So why it's low exposure?
Yeah. Well, so when you go into any particular task, it's rapidly evolving. And so one of the things we've done at the World Economic Forum and at Stanford and at my company, WorkHelix, is we're just constantly updating what kinds of capabilities the machines have. And so all of you as managers, you need to keep up to date on what's doable. I showed you predictive AI, and then I showed you generative AI, and there's a different set of tasks that are being affected. And even within generative AI, there are new tasks. It's a constantly evolving. So the technology is not standing still. And one of the things you want to do is partner with companies that can help you identify what the opportunities are. That said, I don't think every company needs to always be using the very cutting edge technology at any given time. There's frankly so much low-hanging fruit right now that if you simply implement, if something horrible happened and all the technology froze right now and it never advanced, I think we have another 10 years of implementation and of productivity gains just to use what we already have. So my advice to companies is set a priority list, go for some of that low-hanging fruit and things like customer service, coding, sales operations, a lot of management applications. You can implement tools right now and get some productivity gains, but then keep your eye on how they can be used in new capabilities like in negotiation. I think we have, is there anybody on this side? I just want to be fair. Okay. Looks like the questioning people are on this side. Let's go ahead. Go ahead. I didn't want to be.
Hi.
Yeah.
Is the low adoption or the resistance from current job holders is going to some extent, hinder the development of AI, you know, and the...
Yeah. So, well, I have a paper coming out looking at adoption across the entire United States that was done in cooperation with the Census Bureau, and it was like single digits. But that data is already out of date because now the number of users of ChatGPT, well, first of all, let's just find a little adoption. How many of people in front of me here have used ChatGPT? If you're not raising your hand, yeah, okay. So within 60 days, 100 million people were using ChatGPT, and obviously it's a much bigger number now. So I think the adoption is not as low as it was a couple of years ago. Now, I think the real challenge, as I mentioned at the beginning, is translating that adoption into productivity. It's one thing to play around with it and write a love poem for your wife like I did for Alana over there, or had ChatGPT write it for me. But you know, which is, I guess, productive in a way. But also, companies have a lot of opportunities as well. And by the way, you know, Sadia, why don't you come on up here? Because Sadia has been working with a lot of this stuff. She's got a whole team at the World Economic Forum that's been studying some of these issues as well. So are there other questions? Yes, Philippe.
Just wanted to know if is it the continuation of a race against the machine, or is it a real disruption?
Race against the machine. So 12 years ago, I wrote with a book with Andrew McAfee called Race Against the Machine, and I made an argument very similar to what Sadia and I have been making here, which is that you can use technologies as competitors and try to replace people, and you're going to lose that race. Or you can use it to complement people. Race with the machine was what we said. I don't know if it quite works, but the idea is use it to help you go better. And I believe that even more now than I did back then, if that's possible. And that's the advice we've been giving everybody. You know, back to that call center example. One of the reasons that the successful company, Cresta, was able to have their technology work is because they didn't try to do everything. They let the humans do what they were good at and the machines do what they're good at. And it turns out that if you look at all the tasks that a call center operator does, or that an economist does, or a pilot, or anybody does, they can be described in a power law. There's some tasks that are very, very common, and then there's a long tail of tasks that hardly ever happen. Machines are very good when you have got a lot of data. That's machine learning needs data. But when, there's an imaginary graph behind me right now, when there's a long tail where there's only one or two examples, maybe you've never seen it before, machines are terrible. Machine learning doesn't work for that, at least not yet. Humans, however, are pretty good at it. So what you want, there's a natural division of labor of we are better at exceptions and unusual things and figuring out things. Machines are great when they've seen the example before, maybe a million times before. And that's going to be true for some time. How much time do we have left? Okay, oh good, we still have some 8 minutes. So other questions, comments?
Maybe, Eric, I'll just
you wanna
come in on that particular question. Two things. I mean, we've been doing this report every 2 years, the future of jobs. And when we started out in 2016, it was all about this concern around the rise of industrial robots and what that was going to do to jobs in factories. And yes, there's been an integration of more of that technology in advanced manufacturing, but it hasn't done that disruption that everybody was deeply concerned about. Some, but not fully. So there's that element that we have to take into account. It takes time for some of this to get adopted. Second thing, I think we shouldn't forget the huge potential of artificial intelligence in actually personalizing learning and education, which is one of the solutions to helping people move from their current roles that might be declining or that might be disrupted into new roles.
Yeah, that's a great point. I want to emphasize that last one about using these to train and educate people. They can be very personalized. Every person can get their own tutor. There's research that shows that if you get personalized education, you get about 2 standard deviations faster progress than if you're getting the one-size-fits-all education that most people get today. It used to be much too expensive to give everyone personalized education, but with a large language model and other types of generative AI, you can give very personalized education. And even unintentionally, to give you that call center example, we did some research, not in the paper yet, but I'll give you a preview of some new results. It turned out that sometimes the system went down, like any technology does from time to time, and for an economist like me, that was another great experiment because we got to see how do people react when they didn't have access to the system unexpectedly. And I was worried that they would be lost, that they would become so dependent on it. The exact opposite happened. It turned out that the people who had been using the system ended up being better at answering questions than the people who hadn't been. Not quite as good as they were when they had the system live, but they had learned from the system. The system had been coaching them for weeks, months in some cases, and they had learned what some of the right kinds of answers were, and they had retained some of that. And the thing is that the system was giving the answers exactly when they needed it, when it was important to learn them. Previously, they'd gone through, training months earlier, or maybe at the end of the week, the manager would look at their transcript and say, oh, you could have said something different here. You could have mentioned a different product. The ability of these tools to give you real-time, personalized advice is one of the reasons that I think it's a great tool for training, even unintentionally. Other questions? Yeah, right over here.
in the jobs transition, there's often a gap between job losses and the new jobs arriving, and the skills coming through. Is the clock speed of these AI developments meaning that gap is getting smaller or larger?
Both. So one thing that's happening is that the technology is definitely accelerating, and it's creating new needs, and people have to reskill faster. But there are also two offsetting factors. One, as I just mentioned, it is allowing people to learn new skills faster. It's also allowing, with platforms and policymakers, better matching and be able to identify who can move to new areas. Let me give you a concrete example. During COVID, companies around the world laid off millions and millions of people. And then a few, years or months later, they were hiring back some people with some slightly different skills. And it turns out that the people who they were hiring back, they had a new set of skills, but if you look at it, there's a lot of overlap. In many cases, being 80 or 90% overlap. With these tools that go down to the task-based analysis, you can see where those overlaps are. And instead of laying off one person and hiring an entirely different person, which is very expensive, or trying to train someone up from scratch, you can take the first person and say, hey, we only need to teach you another 10 or 20%, and now you've got new skills. You used to pull copper wire, let's teach you how to do fiber optics. You used to do data science, let's teach you how to do machine learning. And these transitions are much easier than having somebody learn from scratch. And one thing that's helping make those transitions easier is we have better predictive AI, we have better generative AI, and so both the challenge is greater, but also the tools to address the challenge are much greater. I think we have maybe time for one more question. All right, over here in the back.
Yeah, so my question is that since technology is improving at such a rapid rate, and how does the college know, or how does the student even know what to study? Because by the time you're out of your college 4 years later, you are already, what shall I say? What's the word I'm looking for? You're not required anymore.
Yeah, right. Well, education has to change. I mean, my industry, I showed you all these industries, my industry has been one of the slowest to change, and it needs to change faster. And I'll point to Andrew Ng again in the back here. One of the other companies he did, as many of you know, Coursera is a tool for bringing stuff online much more rapidly. He has new courses on generative AI that are coming out. I have a course, some of the stuff that I did at Stanford is now coming out online on Coursera. And people can be lifelong learners and continuously get the skills. They can take nano courses where they learn one very specific skill. They can take broader skills. But the era where you go to education for the first, 10 or 20 years of your life, and then you're done, and then you just work, that's gone. And we need to change our model. Stanford University needs to change, and the online courses are part of the solution. Companies can help with this by having continuous education and learning. And of course, all of us ourselves, we have to have a different mindset that we're going to be continuously learning and learning those new skills. Do you want to follow up?
Well, I do get it, that once you're in a job, you're continuously learning. Learning doesn't stop.
Right.
I am talking about the students who are in college, getting into college.
Yeah.
And they are in for the next 4 years.
Yeah.
And, they are saying, okay, do I do this engineering? Do I do that economics?
Yeah.
So what do I do? I mean, am I going to be required at all?
You do want a foundation. And there are some broad skills that are broadly applicable. If you're interested in math and statistics, that's going to be useful for lots of different verticals. If you're great at creative thinking or logical analysis, those are skills and techniques you can apply to lots of different areas. But then you're going to have to continuously learn on top of that as well. Don't think you're going to learn just one narrow craft and be done. It's going to be something where you continuously learn. Well, let me just wrap up by saying, I said that 2024 is going to be the year of productivity, where AI gets a body and takes action and starts transforming each of your companies and countries. But that's only going to happen if you take action. And I really want to inspire you to make an effort to do an analysis of the opportunities in your company. You can do the task-based analysis that I described and see what kind of roadmap you have for getting some of that low-hanging fruit. If you do that, I think you're going to find surprising productivity gains. We found double-digit productivity gains within a few months in some of these applications. I'm pretty confident there are applications like that in each of your companies and countries as well. And so this is not a good time to just sit back and wait. This is a time to start using the technology and beginning to harvest some of those gains. And I wish you the best of luck in doing that.
Gelombang keempat monsun timur laut kini beralih ke selatan tanah air dengan keadaan banjir di Johor semakin meningkat.
Ekonomi Malaysia dijangka berkembang 4.5% pada 2024 dan 4.6% pada tahun hadapan.
Seorang pelajar tingkatan 5 diculik sebelum dikurung, bekas teman lelakinya dikepung.
Tiada laporan rakyat Malaysia terjejas dalam tragedi pengeboman di Kerman Cemetery.
Puan Sri mengidap kanser tahap keempat.
No!
Pewaris yang dicari.
Aku kena serahkan semua hak untuk dia.
This is very important, Mama. Melibatkan Century.
You the one yang nak sangat Century.
I kena cari cucu Mama cepat-cepat.
Saya takut pisah dengan Iman.
Saya takkan pisahkan awak dengan Iman.
Tercetusnya konflik.
Dendam ini harus dibayar.
Pewaris Cinta, Isnin hingga Jumaat di Astro dan On Demand.
Daulat Tuanku.
Shounen to Mecha のコンビが未来はメカアマトに託された。
絶対に諦めない。戦ってみんなを守り抜くんだ。メカボットメカナイズ。
お前今何しやがった。直ちに攻撃準備。